In memory of Father Michael O'Hara. Prologue. Late autumn. In Michigan, nature had staged its annual show of shows. No artist, living or dead, could have matched God's broad strokes of color in stands of trees. Now it was gone. Brilliant leaves had faded in turn to dull and fallen to earth. There are those for whom spring signifies birth, summer, life, autumn, death, winter, burial, followed by nothing. For others, the very perpetuity of the seasonal cycle attests to summer as life, autumn, death, winter, burial, and spring, rebirth into eternal life. Father Robert Koesler belonged to the latter school. And those were the thoughts he mused on as he stood very much alone in the Holy Sepulchre Cemetery. He shuffled his right foot, allowing the chilly breeze to waft some leaves, uncovering a grave marker set flush with the ground. The chiseled inscription provided minimal information, a name and 2 dates, the earlier commemorating birth, the latter departure from this life. In the span between these 2 dates was a life that changed many others. Actually, this story began some 40 years earlier. Father Koesler, then a young priest, was appointed the unlikely editor of the Detroit Catholic, the archdiocesan newspaper. The Detroit Free Press, reporting the appointment, termed the paper influential, and was patently surprised that this inexperienced inner-city priest had been given the job. Concurrent with the appointment, Koesler was directed to live at the rectory of St. Ursula. St. Ursula's could have been designated an ethnic parish, having been erected in a neighborhood almost entirely Italian. By the time Koesler moved in, it was almost equally Italian and Polish, with a mix of African-American. The most distinctive feature of St. Ursula's was its pastor, Father Angelico, who succeeded the affable Father Pompilio. In the early 60s, the Second Vatican Council was about to break forth upon the world. Few could have guessed the changes it would bring. At this time, the clergy were split not along conservative and liberal lines. Rather, the line was drawn between pastors and their assistant priests. Father Angelico was one of a trio of East Side pastors recognized as notorious tyrants. He virtually imprisoned the 2 priests assigned to him as assistants, and dictated their daily schedule down to the very minute. In this he was not blocked by current church law. With rare exception, each priest who served under Father Angelico emerged from his 5-year stint with a severe case of shell shock or battle fatigue. Whatever one cared to term their condition, they were rubbed raw. The one who uniquely escaped Angelico's tender mercies was Father Koesler. Angelico had no pigeonhole for him. Koesler was not a defenseless assistant. He was in residence. Whatever the hell that meant, Angelico had no idea what to do with him, nor what his role might be in the pastor's fiefdom. For all Angelico knew, Koesler might be a chancery spy. So Bob Koesler ended by, in effect, writing his own ticket. He offered daily Mass and assisted on weekends. Father Koesler could not help but be acutely aware of the shameful treatment accorded Angelico's assistants. Had he been more experienced, he would have intervened, although what he might have accomplished was questionable. The Chancery, with ultimate clout, though aware of the situation, did nothing. Once Koesler left St. Ursula's, he tried to bind up the wounds of shredded dignity inflicted by its despotic pastor. As part of this effort, he established an informal group dedicated to supporting those who had served under Angelico, or were presently imprisoned there. The nuns who staffed St. Ursula's school were in worse condition than the parish's assistant priests. Not only were they browbeaten and cowed by Angelico's pervasive presence, they were also dominated by their rigorous religious order. Not until nuns began leaving religious life in large numbers in the wake of the council were these women free to join the recovering Ursuline group. In the beginning, the organization was more or less ad hoc, called upon as needed. Gradually, as a result of the growing priest shortage, fewer and fewer priests were assigned to St. Ursula's. Then Father Angelico died. The group's raison d'etre began to wane. Eventually, the group, or what was left of it, met only once a year, on the first Wednesday of June. Now, in the year 2000, fewer than 10 of the Ursuline Club remained, and a peculiar chemistry marked their relationship. At this point, Koesler was able to do little more than observe their interaction, an interaction that tore asunder committed pairings and forged others, an interaction that led to death for one of the members and possible complicity for others. He felt sorrow for the one at whose grave he now stood and prayed. He felt sorrow for just about everyone involved on that fateful day, the first Wednesday in June. Chapter 1. Never get sick on a Wednesday. Why not? Because the doctors and priests will be on the golf course. Lil smiled at the memory of the old wheeze as she peeled strips of bacon from the package and slid them into the frying pan. It was very much an in-joke for Catholics of long standing, who could count themselves well within the loop. Once upon a time, when Catholics fell ill, a priest might be summoned as routinely as a doctor. While the doctor scribbled a prescription, the priest would confer the appropriate sacrament and assure the family of his prayers, as well as those of the other parishioners. Nowadays, doctors don't make house calls, and priests, an ever more endangered species, are buffered from callers by answering services. Nonetheless, Wednesday is still a popular day off for those able to arrange it. Lil wore only the top half of a man's pajamas. The man, still snoozing, wore the bottoms. The sun was creeping into the basement studio apartment. The tiny dwelling comprised a kitchenette wall, one bath, and an all-purpose space that was foyer, living room, dining room, and bedroom. This Wednesday in June promised to be a pleasant day, the type that invited one to get out and enjoy the weather. Many of those left behind at this suburban apartment complex, after the majority went off to work, mostly mothers and young children, would gather poolside. Not this couple. Lil and Rick had to be extremely careful. This caution did not concern Rick nearly as much as it did Lil. He was by nature carefree, spontaneous, and relatively fearless. She envied him these traits. Still, she feared they'd be found out. Her fear was more for him than it was for her, but she too had high stakes in their relationship. After all, Lil Niedermier was principal of St. Enda's elementary school. She wondered how long she would hold that position if it leaked out that she had for the past 10 years been half of a significant other relationship. The marital status of parochial teachers and principals had been taken for granted in the era when Catholic schools were staffed almost totally by nuns. Religious brothers served a few schools. Priests, Jesuits, Basilians, and the like, taught at some other schools as well as at seminaries. That considerable dedication, for that was what it was, solved any number of problems. There were no unions in Catholic schools. There was nothing to be negotiated. There were no interviews of prospective teachers to sap the pastor's time. If St. Parathanasius' school was slated to have 24 Dominican nuns, there they were, 24 dedicated women, all in black and white habit. None of the 24 had volunteered for a specific parish. The pastor did not select any of the nuns. They were sent. Like so many other changes in the Catholic Church since 1965, when the Second Vatican Council concluded, things were radically different in today's parochial schools. Formerly, there was no challenge in finding the layperson on the Catholic school faculty. She was the only one wearing ordinary clothing. Now there was plenty of challenge. The nun, if there was even one on the faculty, probably couldn't find a religious habit to save her soul, literally. So, layperson Lil Niedermier found herself principal of a parochial school in a northwest suburb of Detroit. She could have made lots more money teaching in the public school system. Her choice to go parochial was partly because her schooling had been Catholic, and also because here she could achieve the rank of principal, a position for which she would have had to wait many more years had she been in the public system. But what would the parishioners of St. Enda's, let alone Father O'Leary, the pastor,